What's up YouTube, how goes it? So I figured, finally it's time to do a review on the M1 Mac Mini. However, I noticed on YouTube there are tons and tons of videos regarding the 8GB RAM version. However, only a handful for the 16GB version, which is exactly why I figured I'm going to review the 16GB configuration. Also, I figured for a lot of power users who are actually going to be using it for workflow and productivity, they might go for the more powerful variant anyway, which is why I'm doing a detailed power review for you guys to see if the new M1 Mac Mini might have a special place in your hearts and whether or not it's worth your hard-earned cash. As always guys, if you enjoyed this video, consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. We got all sorts of awesome tech content right here. Without further ado, let's get started. Starting off with the unboxing, you can see that Apple has a nice minimalist style as far as packaging goes, and they're second to none in that regards. With that being said, however, not a whole lot has changed compared to previous iterations of the Mac Mini. The M1 still has the exact same packaging with the Mac Mini on the front in the color it comes in. As you make your way towards the backside, you notice you have your basic configuration details, but really beyond that, there's not a whole lot more to see, which in my opinion is a good thing. Beyond that, we come to my favorite part, which is removing the plastic wrapping. I don't know what it is, but it's genuinely satisfying. Anyway, once you remove all the wrapping off, we proceed to open the box, and of course once it opens, the first thing inside you see is the Mac Mini in its silver color wrapped nicely. Once you unwrap it, again, here you go. You can see it's super reflective. This is the same silver color that we've had in previous iterations, so it's not anything new in that regards, but more on the Mac Mini in a second. Past that, you're going to find your Apple booklet, which of course has a signature design in California line. Once you open up the booklet pouch, inside you'll see there's a couple of paperwork. This includes the quick start guide, the compliance and regulatory information, and yes, for you Apple fanatics, it does come with the Apple stickers, don't panic. Finally, you have your wall outlet cable. Keep in mind this is essentially a desktop, so it operates just like one with a 2-pin adapter towards the Mac Mini. Let's talk about the look and feel of the new M1 Mac Mini. In terms of design, this is almost exactly the same as previous iterations of the Mac Mini or the Intel counterpart. Weighing at just 2.6 pounds, this is a pretty light piece of machinery. However, it feels every so bit as premium. That's because on the top side, you have a nice metallic finish with that gorgeous silver color, and in the dead center, of course, you have the Apple logo, which is a mirror-like reflective surface, which is great. 3 of the 4 sides continue this unibody metallic finish, and they definitely feel nice and smooth with the rounded corners, and you also have the power indicator on the front side. The rear side of the iMac is where all the exciting stuff is happening. So of course you have the power button. Right next to that you have the DC jack. Beyond that you have a Ethernet port, 2 Thunderbolt ports, you also have the HDMI port, 2 USB 3.0 ports, and beneath that you have the headphone jack. Also beneath all of that you have the exhaust vent for the cooling fan, which by the way I will talk more about later on in the video. As we make our way to the bottom of the device, you can see on the outskirt that unibody metallic finish continues. As you come towards the center, you have a massive rubber dome. Of course, this is to make sure that your desktop stays in place, and you have the Mac Mini branding in the dead center of the rubber dome. As far as initiation goes, keep in mind the Mac Mini is basically a BYOD device. What I mean by that is that it's a standalone desktop, which means you better have your own monitor, keyboard, and mouse, because if you don't, congratulations, you basically bought a very expensive premium looking brick with a Apple logo on it. So make sure you bring your goods. As far as setup goes, it's pretty straightforward. You do get Apple's latest version of macOS on here, also known as Big Sur, and the installation itself is pretty straightforward. It'll take you a couple of minutes to get through the initial prompts, and you'll be in the operating system in no time. Now let's get into the juicy stuff. Performance. Now look, I'm gonna be really honest with you. If you bought an M1 Mac Mini so you could open Safari faster, congratulations, you played yourself. Look, here's the thing. The M1 Mac Mini works just like the Intel counterpart. Things are super fast and snappy, applications open right away, everything's responsive, and honestly on the surface, nothing feels different. And that's a great thing because that's how it's supposed to be. That is the perfect example of a smooth transition. Now of course, where things do get interesting is when you run non-native M1 applications. For example, I installed Adobe Rush, the x86 version, and right away the first thing I noticed is that when you open up Adobe Rush for the first time, Rosetta 2 actually is running it in the background, and it took several minutes for Adobe Rush to open up, which by the way is entirely normal for non-native M1 apps. Once Rush was open, however, it worked just like it does on the Intel counterparts. Everything was super smooth. In fact, so much so that when I tried 1080p editing on it, the workflow was perfect, no frame drops. And even when I pushed it to 4K editing, I was still able to actually do a pretty productive workflow with the occasional frame drop. That's pretty impressive. However, when you're editing on Final Cut Pro, at 4K, there's practically no frame drop whatsoever. I was actually kind of mind blown just how efficient the M1 chip is, especially when you have optimized programs for the M1. But even if you are running Rosetta 2, it does a fantastic job. So all in all, I think Apple really nailed this. Of course, I will be doing more detailed tests in the coming days, and I will be making videos about them, especially when it comes to video editing and productivity in general. So make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for that. Now, one important thing to keep in mind is the fact that I got the 16GB variant. A lot of people who got the 8GB variant may have a very different experience when they're doing 4K or even higher editing. I always say this, and there's this stigma that came around the M1 that 8GB is the new 16GB on the M1s. Look guys, that's an ignorant statement. It's simply not true. Yes, the M1 applications are far more efficient compared to their x86 counterparts. However, 8GB of RAM is still just 8GB of RAM. Not every application is going to cut its resource usage just in half magically, right? So you're still going to have buildup. And when you start doing more demanding tasks, or if you're doing, let's say 3-4 years down the road, when more and more applications start having more resource requirements, you may regret getting just 8GB of RAM. So if you have a heavy workflow, I would highly advise you to consider coughing up the extra cash to get the 16GB variant, even if that means compromising on your overall storage. But guys, I gotta be honest, you know what the most impressive thing about the new M1 chips are? Right from the get-go, you're gonna notice the fan never goes off on this thing. I mean, I've done 4K editing and the fan has not yet gone on, even once. It's just totally impressive. It's as quiet as a silent fart. Thankfully, it doesn't smell like one. Now, with that being said, of course, I have to be honest, I haven't tested the Mac Mini enough to see when the fan comes on. I'm sure there are certain use cases where it will, but at the time of this recording, even 4K editing wasn't enough to bring on the fan. If this was my gaming PC, the fan at 4K editing is like it's gonna go and beat up someone, but you can't even tell this device is here in this case. It's also worth noting that the M1 Mac Mini does in fact include a speaker built in. It's nothing grand as far as quality goes, but it's good to know that you have that option there. Unfortunately, there is still no mic built in, so make sure you bring your own mic in case you're interested. And in case you want to have a quick hear at how the M1 Mac Mini speakers sound, here's a quick sound test for you. So what's my final take on all this? Assuming you get the base configuration with the 16GB RAM on the Mac Mini, it's gonna set you back about $900 USD. With that being said, I definitely think that this version of the Mac Mini is its best version ever. Now the M1 is not the most powerful computer out there. It doesn't have to be though, because it's definitely one of the better performing ones. It wrecks its Intel equivalent in every use case I've tried so far. Also, it's worth noting that the M1 Mac Mini is intended to perform just as good, if not better, as the Intel counterpart, and this should all happen behind the scenes. And that's where Apple kind of nailed it. You don't realize that you're actually on a different device altogether. It feels like another day using an Intel device, with the key difference being A, there's practically no fan noise, so you don't ever feel like your device is doing anything, which is amazing in my opinion. And B, of course, you have the added convenience of being able to use x86 apps thanks to Rosetta 2. And yes, granted that when you first open an application that's non-native to M1, it takes quite the time to load up, but this is a one-time inconvenience in most cases, and generally speaking, those devices perform almost or just as well as they would on the Intel counterpart. Next, needless to say, in terms of value, to get this level of performance on an Intel counterpart, you need to spend a considerably larger amount of money on the Mac Mini. So I would say, unless otherwise you have a very specific case to buy an Intel one, you should be buying the M1 variant. Now keep in mind, this is a first generation edition product. So of course there's going to be problems. For example, recently I've heard that of course there are still ongoing Bluetooth problems with the Mac Mini. Some users reported that their mouse disconnects entirely, and these problems will take some time to be sorted out. So be ready and be in the mindset if you buy a first generation product that you may run into such problems. But all in all, guys, I can wholeheartedly recommend the Mac Mini for anyone who's doing any sort of high-end productivity like video editing, Photoshop, or even other creative activities. This is a great machine at a great value, and I definitely think it's the best M1 product Apple has in their lineup right now, both in terms of quality, value, and just overall production value. So all in all, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I hope you found it to be meaningful. I hope you'll consider all the things I said in my review. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel. Like I mentioned, we have all sorts of awesome tech content on here. And thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Souls Tech, logging out.